My name is Richard Ferrer, and I can say I am cloud hired.
That yes, come and join and get cloud hired. I'm cloud hired.
I'm Cloud Hired.
I'm Cloud Hired.
Hey, Go Cloud Architect family. I'm Cloud Hired.
So, I'm Cloud Hired, guys!
So I'll just say I'm cloud hired.
I'm cloud hired.
I'm cloud hired thanks to Go Cloud Architects.
It worked for me, and now I'm Cloud Hired. Because of Google Architect program, I am Cloud Hired. See!
I am Cloud Hired. Thank you, Mike and the Glowcloud team.
Welcome, everyone. This is Mike Gibbs, and today we're here to help you build your career. Maybe you have a goal of becoming a cloud architect, or maybe you have a goal of becoming an enterprise architect, or desire to become a security architect or an AI architect. And that's why we are here to guide you on your path to any of the various IT architecture careers. My name is Mike Gibbs. I've been an enterprise architect now for a little over 25 years. It's been a long time since I left my internal medicine background as a nurse practitioner prior to that. And I've spent about 2 decades helping people just like you get your first tech job, get promoted in tech. And you can find clients of mine at Apple, Amazon, Cisco, Google, IBM, Accenture, Deloitte, Microsoft, KPMG, Capgemini, PricewaterhouseCoopers, Barclays Bank, JP Morgan Chase Bank, PNC Bank, any large prestigious organization throughout the world. And I want you to have that same level of success. So I am here to basically answer any architect career questions you have or any technology questions about your career. For example, even if you want to become a network engineer, I'm happy to guide you there, or other things along the way. So that's why we're here today, to answer any of your questions. So please bring us your questions so we can assist, and we'll be happy to answer them. Before we begin, I want to talk about a couple of free things we have going on for you. Tomorrow, we have a How to Become a Security Architect webinar. And in that webinar, we will talk about what we do as security architects, the skills that you will need as a security architect, how to become one, how to stand out, how to build your profile, and literally speaking, everything necessary to get your first security architect job. And you can come, you can ask any questions, and we'd be thrilled to speak with you. So please keep that in mind. That is actually tomorrow. Now, many people are in their career and they're wondering how to prepare for their next interview, for example, and they're looking for a little bit of guidance, or they're looking for guidance on how to become a cloud architect or an AI architect, and maybe they can't make a webinar. Guess what? We've got some ebooks for you in the description of this video to help you with that along the way. Go sign up for some resources. They're completely free, and then they'll be emailed to you. And of course, we have our summer savings, which is 50% off of all of our programs for a very short period of time. So take advantage of that, if you will. And Tyrone from my team, if you can bring me the first question, and let me make sure that my phone is properly muted, because realistically speaking, it seems to be beeping a little too much. So Tyrone, bring me in the first question. From Cloud Doctor. Hello, Mike and team. It's been a while since you've been listening. The question you have is, which non-vendor certs will help the architect the most? So, Cloud Doctor, let me talk about the difference between architecture and what you'll find in any of the architecture certifications, and how we want to use the architecture certifications, but what's the difference? So let me give you a couple of examples of things that enterprise architects might do versus these non-vendor architecture certifications. So as an enterprise architect, I could be working for a company like Cisco, and I was, and we could be designing a $1 billion architecture for a client. So, and we are working with the sales organization to help them with their products that might be good for the client. We might be working with under vendors and other partners along the way. So that's something we might actually be doing. And actually, it's something we will be doing a lot of time. Now, if we're an enterprise architect, we're going to have to map technology roadmaps to revenue streams moving forward. Now, and that way we can show that if we modernize something, here's how it's going to impact the revenue from your new sales application, for example. Or here's what that AI recommendation engine can do to your sales based upon your clients' buying pattern, the dwell time, what have you on your website, those kind of things. So that's something an enterprise architect would learn. We're doing their job, and none of that's going to be covered in any of these frameworks. Now, as an enterprise architect, you're going to have to resolve conflict between business units. You're going to have to manage stakeholders across an organization. And that means you're going to have some leadership skills, lots of negotiation skills, and lots of executive skills to deal with the problems and challenges between, say, sales and product when you're designing new systems and they have competing interests from each other. Sales wants to sell anything, product wants to make sure that it's actually going to work, what have you. So kind of keep this in the back of your mind. Now, as an enterprise architect, I'm going to have to give a strategy presentation at global conferences. I'm going to be speaking to the media potentially, and I'm going to be presenting to the C-suite and the board. Now, those kind of executive presence presentation skills are just not covered in certifications. Now, as an enterprise architect, I might lead a team of 150 people for a year or more on a project. So again, there's no leadership, none of that management, none of those executive skills, the finesse that's ever part of these things. Same thing. So managing stakeholders, managing vendors, that's not covered in any of that, but it's part of our job. Now, what if we want to lead an enterprise-wide change where we're going to change the way the business operates, which means changing key values, key business processes are part of the business architecture. And then we need to figure out new technologies that the new business processes demand. Now, with that, we enterprise architects are going to have to convince people to adopt the technology, get stakeholder buy-in and support. And again, this is executive skills, and none of that's covered in a certification. And these are just some of the things we do as architects. So here's how I recommend using TOGAF and ITIO. The first thing you have to do is learn architecture, because you will learn zero architecture in any of these certifications. Even the AWS Solutions Architect Professional, here's what it is: the name of something and how to configure it, which has nothing to do with architecture, which designing a strategic advantage for an organization. So here's how I recommend you do this. Step one, Cloud Doctor, learn architecture. Step two, make sure you train all the soft skills hiring managers want, because 90% of the people fail the interview for soft skills. So make sure you train that. Phase three, now I want you to go out there and build a real world architecture portfolio with real world architecture artifacts and things that we actually do as architects, which prove you know what an architect really even is and that you can do it. After that, once you've got all those skills, the only thing I want you to do these certifications for, like TOGAF, and say an AWS Solutions Architect Professional, is most people don't know they have nothing to do with architecture. So it's good bait. It's going to help you get more interviews along with your LinkedIn work and your branding work and your resume work, because that's what you're going to get out of it, more interviews. So if you just do the certifications by themselves, you'll get lots of interviews, but nobody will hire you because you don't have any architect skills. So that's why I say phase one, become a great architect. Phase two, make sure you get all the soft skills that you're exactly what the hiring manager wants. Phase three, prove it. And then use phase four, which is the LinkedIn stuff, to get people to come to you, to interview you, the certifications to make your resume and LinkedIn profile look better. But realize that's all it is. It's just a pretty wrapping paper on you. What you can do, that's the only thing that matters, not the certifications. Now, Cloud Doctor, I also want you to understand, once you reach a certain level of executive, you're going to be removing certifications from your resume. I can remember when one of the VPs at one of the world's largest tech companies in the world said, Mike, I need you to remove your CISSP and I need you to remove your CCIE from your business cards. And I said, why would I want to remove that? And they said, Mike, do you want to be seen as a peer to a CEO, to be able to advise a CEO about their strategy and about their organization and as a peer-to-peer executive? Or do you want to be seen as the techie of the room? If you want to be seen as the techie in the room, I can send you back to solutions architecture or sales engineering, but not as an executive architect, not as an enterprise architect. So certifications are only to get interviews. Cloud Doctor, I hope that helps. Also, is multi-cloud certification better than a single cloud? So Cloud Doctor, let's put it this way. If somebody only knows a single cloud, there's no reason to hire them at all. And here's the reason why. Now, the AWS can hire people that only know AWS. And Microsoft can hire people that only know Microsoft. But the reality of the world is 98% of organizations are multi-cloud. So if someone only knows a single cloud, not only do they not usually know cloud computing, they just know the name of something, but they don't know what the real issues are, like why, for example, in most cases, I couldn't use an Azure Cosmos or a DynamoDB, why I probably won't almost never use an Amazon Aurora, but I might use an Oracle database all the time. Why I would swap something out with something that's open standards. Why I wouldn't use, in many cases, the cloud provider's native security tools. Why I would use bigger security tools that are more industrial and have more capabilities and more functionality. So I need someone that knows the cloud. Now, someone that knows the cloud knows all of the cloud. That means the networking that makes the cloud fundamental, and it means the cloud stuff, the compute. And guess what? It's the same compute stuff in a data center as a cloud. For example, a virtual machine, a container, an application functional virtualization, or function as a service. But what I need the person to know is, which one should I use? What are the strengths of each option? What are the weaknesses of each option? Given this potential issue, which one would be better for this specific use case? Weigh them out, size them out, and figure out how to plan. That's what I need. Now, if a person only knows something like an AWS Solutions Architect Professional, click here, and they know the names of something, they can't do any of that because they don't even know what it is, because it's not even covered in the AWS Solutions Architect Professional. Now, when we get into storage area networks, I care that you understand the types of storage, the performance limitations of each type of storage, how you work around the performance type limitations of each type of storage, the strengths and the weaknesses and the advantages of different type of storage, where, for example, why might you use immutable object storage in one case versus file storage? Why is it that block storage doesn't perform anywhere near as well as in-server storage? And if so, what are the workarounds around that? So I need anybody that I hire to have that deep understanding of block storage, object storage, file storage, RAID, on all the types of workarounds to the poor performance of the storage we typically get outside of server storage. So I need people that know that. Now, at the same time, I need people that understand databases, know SQL databases, relational databases, how they're scaled, how you would secure them, whatever. The same thing. I need people that understand security. And that means knowing what types of IAM systems to use, knowing what kind of physical security we're going to use, what kind of network security we're going to use, which is going to be part of it, what kind of application security, what kind of data security we're putting into what we're doing. And I mean a lot more. There's a lot more than encryption. What type of data loss prevention strategies do we have? What type of authentication systems are we using? Are we using something context aware because we need a little bit more intelligence, what have you, over something that's, say, role-based? So this is kind of where we need to begin. So where we come here is, that's why you have to know the cloud. Same thing with security. I need you to know why you probably can't use the cloud provider's firewalls, what you give up versus what you get with the next generation firewall from, say, a cloud provider. And I need you to understand that. So if you understand that, and then you understand BGP, and you understand network segmentation, and you understand routing, and the types of wide area networks you can choose, and the reasons why, you know all clouds. Now you can just go to the silly cloud provider, and if they decide to call their virtual machine EC2, you can laugh at the silly marketing name. And then Google calls that same virtual machine a compute engine instance. You can remember that, okay, it's compute engine and it's also EC2, but Oracle calls it a virtual machine and Azure calls it a virtual machine, but you know what it is. You know how to size it. You know when to use a virtual machine, when not to use a virtual machine. And that comes by learning the cloud. But if you only learn one cloud, you learn the name of something and how to configure it, but they never teach you what it is. And that's why so many people are leaving the cloud just like they went into the cloud. They went to the cloud for some kind of transformation, and they bought the identical thing that they had in the data center, but they paid 2 to 3 times more for it. So of course they're bringing it back. So it's knowing which stuff to use, where to put it, knowing your high throughput, high performance workloads are about 10 times cheaper in the data center. Knowing your agile workloads and your on-demand sporadic things may often be cheaper in the cloud, but the cloud gives you more agility and scalability. That's what you need as an architect. And you can't get any of that if you only know one cloud provider. And the other way I would describe a cloud provider is, could you imagine having a physician that could only prescribe drugs from one pharmaceutical company when there's 100 pharmaceutical companies or 200 in the world that make life-saving drugs for different diseases? Well, the multi-cloud architect can use the best from every single one. Imagine a doctor that could only prescribe drugs from one company for their patients. Imagine how many people would die. So how you get paid as an architect, what your career is, the results you can deliver for someone. If you only know one cloud, less than 2% of real world enterprise companies could hire you in the first place. So you have to learn the cloud, not a single cloud. How to position yourself as an AI architect. Is it possible to shoot straight for this position without any experience as an architect? The answer is yes. In fact, there's no rules whatsoever of where you should start. None. Balwinder was a stay-at-home mom, and her first job was after we trained her was at Microsoft as a cloud solutions architect. Daniel was a high school dropout hired by JP Morgan Chase as a solutions architect without a GED after taking our training. Wallace Agana was hired as an enterprise architect, which is the biggest of all the architect roles, hired by JP Morgan Chase in England as an enterprise architect. His first tech job, his last tech job was sales. Jermaine was selling landscaping gear before he went to SNHU or something like that as an enterprise architect. Richard was working at PNC Bank, but it wasn't in an IT job. And he left our program, MUFG Bank, and was there as a cloud architect immediately after that. Yvonne's first job was at AWS. Nafuli's first job was a chief technology officer in Manchester, and we trained him as well. Pierre's last job was a sailboat operator, and his next job after that was at Lease Web as a solutions architect. Arun was working at Home Depot, the retail store, and not in a tech role, and he was hired by TELUS as a solutions architect. So the key is that you can easily do it, but you have to have the skills first for the AI architect. Now, that means you will need 2 sets of skills. Now, David Lithicum and I will run another AI architecture webinar soon where we will talk about every skill that you need. But you have to understand there's 2 good things that I love about architecture roles. One is there's some roles you can't self-teach. Now, you can learn how to code, which we don't do as architects. You can learn Linux by just going there. And then there are some jobs which you can't just teach yourself. You can't teach yourself how to fly an airplane, because if you do and the plane crashes, well, it's not just a good idea. You can't just teach yourself how to do surgery on a live person, because I promise you that won't go work out well. And that's why we medical people go to school for a long time before we ever touch someone. Most people can never teach themselves architecture because they don't even know what architecture is, because it's very similar to the physician role. So there's a huge barrier to entry to architecture. You have to be taught it. Why do I love that? Because most people will never go to training, so that creates the perfect supply and demand curve. But you will have to know certain things to be an AI architect. And that means you are going to have 2 sets of skills, and you have to have the skills before you actually can apply for the job or position yourself for it. So if you understand that the AI architect is going to have to be able to sell, and here's the reason you're going to have to be able to sell. Either you're working as a solutions architect, say as an AI architect for NVIDIA or Amazon or Microsoft, you have to sell your solution to the client. If you don't, and the client doesn't buy your stuff, well, you're now obviously not doing your job. Or you're working at the company itself. And in the company itself, where you're actually working, you want to sell them into buying your $50 million of security, or spend $100 million or even $1 billion on AI. If you're an architect and you can't convince the CEO to spend $1 billion or whatever is necessary for your project, it dies. So basically, sales skills come first. Now, the next skill that you need to have as an architect is stakeholder management skills. We spend the majority of our time meeting with executives, meeting with key stakeholders from our clients, negotiating between stakeholders, mapping out their needs, mapping out business capabilities, business value streams, business processes, etc., business architectures. And if you don't know what those things are, that I wouldn't expect you to unless you were taught architecture, but we have to tune them and optimize these kinds of things. Now, we will have to negotiate between stakeholders that have different needs. We will have to try to figure standardized systems. We will try to get rid of technical debt. So this is going to take a lot of executive skills to do this, to do the schmoozing, to meet with people and negotiate. So it's going to be a lot of that. Now, you're going to have to be able to write it like an executive, write 2-page briefs to convince someone to spend $50 million or $100 million, and at the same time build a business case that the chief financial officer is going to choose to have their team chew through and see if your numbers make sense. And it has to be strong. Now, the next thing is you have to have what's called CXO relevancy. You know exactly what to communicate to the CEO versus the CFO versus the CIO. Now, at the same time, if you've got the ability to negotiate, build a business case, you've got about a third of the skills. So when you get past that, and I'd say that's actually a third of the skills, but it's 75% of the job. Then you have to think about, do you actually understand the technology? Now, the technology is not how to code. It is not how to configure. And if you've configured things for the last 10 years, you still will need to learn design, because design for real versus design in the tech world is very different than architecture. So that means from a general knowledge perspective, you will need to basically understand the data center and the cloud. That means compute, that means storage, that means data, that means databases, that means applications, that means security. And not how to configure it, but a broad understanding why. If I make this change to the system, what is the impact on another change? If I've got this option versus this option, how do I weigh this option? Given these three options presented, option one is good at A, B, and C, but bad at D and E. Option two is great at X, Y, Z, but really bad at Alpha and Bravo, and vice versa, which is better to the business. So beyond that, that means you need some network design skills, some knowledge about what goes into wide area networks and local area networks, and how to optimize network performance, because you might have certain latency needs or network performance needs. You'll have to understand some knowledge about networking. Now, you will have to understand security, because we have to understand if these AI systems get hacked. Imagine poisoning the model by giving it bad information and having the AI act like the Terminator as opposed to something that's writing your papers for you. You know, bad things can happen. So we have to understand security, and whether that means IAM to a degree, network security, zero trust, data security extensively when we're dealing with an AI architect. Now, that person will still need to understand some degree of applications. They're going to have a lot of knowledge on ethics, specifically in AI architect roles. There's a lot of ethical knowledge there. So then there's data design skills. And then we start getting into the more focused expertise that the architect has. So what kind of databases could we have? Should we use? What kind of training data do we have us? What should we use? How do we clean that data? How do we normalize that data? How do we sanitize that data before we even touch anything? What type of inference engine should we use? And why? What type of AI model should we use? Should we use a small language model, a large language model? Should we go agentic AI? Should we do some agentic AI, some machine learning to maybe make some recommendations and generate for the next thing? What kind of things are we using? What kind of models are going to work for us? Do we train our own? Do we make it custom and accurate? Or do we take some other big model and work off of that and develop something else? How do we train those models? Do we do part training in the cloud, bring them back? What are we training on? What's going to go into the AI operations? What's that? So, yep, if you have that and you've been doing that, and you can walk into an organization and ask them, tell me about your budget, tell me about your data, tell me about where you want to be 5 years from now. Tell me what your business pain points are, what your business challenges are, get business at metrics, understand how to look at the business architecture, figure out where in the business architecture you can change things, whether it's people or processes or what have you, how you can impact that. Then be able to create a team, lead that team of people to evaluate what you've got, lead a different team of people to create a strategic blueprint for them in the future, lead that team for the next 6 to 12 months, create all the architectural artifacts, architectural documents, architectural contracts, respond to RFPs or whatever, close that deal, sell that thing, create the government structure, then you're there. If you're not there, you're going to need to learn how to become an AI architect first. And as it turns out, if you want to join me on the Security Architect program tomorrow, I'll dive much deeper into these things, but I'll go into AI afterwards. Or, what you could do is also, we've got a document on how to become an AI architect in the description of this video. Tyron, if you could please pull that out and pop it in the chat box for you. And then that's the key. And then there's going to be a process to get everything. So how do you get noticed? How do you get people to come to you? How do you get people to come to you so you don't have to apply for the job? Come to the webinar and I'll talk about how to do all those things tomorrow, including what hiring managers want and what they need to see in an architect. Now, I'll focus it on the security architect, but after that, I'd be more than happy to go down the AI architect path. And of course, David Lithicum is going to come back and do another AI architect with me very soon. I've only worked on AI since 2001, so I don't consider myself to be an AI expert. David's worked with AI since 1985. Because of his knowledge and work in AI in 1985, he worked at NASA for a long period of time in AI. And it's been what he's done for 35 years. And most of my time is networking, security, and enterprise architecture. So I'll also have David Lithicum come in as well. But we'll give you the how for any architect job tomorrow. You have about 6 years experience in business consulting. Please give you a path to become an enterprise architect, and please let me know the benefits over business consulting. So the key is, I don't know what kind of business consultant you are. If you are an $800,000 or $1 million a year strategy consultant, and then I'd say stay where you're at. Because I know many $1 million plus strategy consultants that are working in business consulting. And I too have worked as a management and strategy consultant, which is called a business architect. Now, I don't know the kind of role you're in. Now, generally speaking, when we have certain areas of specialty, we find ourselves in better opportunities. And let me give you an example of what I mean. So I've always been a microeconomics person and a macroeconomics person and a finance person. That's where I've always loved. But let's talk about really dive deep onto the different kinds of skills and their impact on the supply and demand curve and their impact on salary. And I'll start with what, realistically speaking, in today's world is probably the worst place to be. And I'll share a slide in a minute where we're going to walk through this, and then I'll show you why there's other places which are much better. So if we were to look at a supply and demand curve, and I'll make this a little clearer. This you should apply to any career or almost anything you do in your life if you're going to plan. If we look at the worst possible career right now, it's software development. And you may notice, you've heard me tell people for years to get out of software development, to get out of back-end engineering, to get out of anything not related to architecture, sales, or executive things, anything where you've got special skills that can't be replaced by AI. But let's look at the supply and demand curve, and we'll pick the worst of all possible situations, which is software development. Now, in this particular situation, we've got a huge supply. The flatter this gets, the huge supply. And where the supply and demand intersect, that's going to be the price or salary in our case. And here's what I need you to understand, and why is it so bad for the software developers, which is why I've generally told people to do other careers. Well, everybody was told to code since they were a child, so many people learned to code. Now, there's no barrier to entry to learning the code. It's not like architecture. You can't learn architecture by yourself. You can't learn how to fly an airplane by yourself. You can't learn medicine by yourself. Because if you design the wrong architecture for a business, 100,000 people lose their jobs. And if you do the wrong surgery, somebody dies. If you're flying the airplane and you don't know how to fly it, you crash, which is why you can't self-teach certain careers. But the software development career, the coding career, you can self-teach yourself. Now, another thing that I want you to think about is some jobs need to be done more locally. An enterprise architect, you have to be fairly local. But as software developer, if we really think about it, it doesn't matter where they're at. So for a software developer, are they better if they live in San Francisco than if they lived in Lagos, Nigeria, or Cape Town, South Africa, or Bangalore, India, or Karachi, Pakistan? Not necessarily. So it doesn't matter where the software developer is anywhere in the world. So it's typically why you see people in the US or UK, architects and salespeople doing our job up here, and then we outsource the software development overseas. Now, this problem gets further exacerbated with companies like Microsoft writing more than 25% of their code with AI. Facebook writing more than 25% of their code with AI, Google writing more than 25% of their code with AI, and Salesforce doing 50% of that type of hands-on work predominantly with AI. So you can see the worst position to be right now is in software development. I expect a large number of layoffs and unfortunately very low salaries because of that. Now, 2 years ago, you heard me say get out of engineering because there's going to be job losses and move into roles that no one else can do. So the first thing you have to realize is if you have a business acumen salary, typically speaking, a generic business consultant, you're right here. This is a really good place to be. And why is that? because you've got business consulting skills and business acumen, which probably didn't have to. You could have learned it on the job, but reading a couple hundred or 1,000 books, but you probably have an MBA at this point, which means you've got some executive skills here. You've got a lot of business acumen, a lot of those high price skills. And this is a pretty nice place. So if the software developer is here, your business consulting sometimes is typically around here. Now, the key is if we take a regular business consultant and then we arm them with technology strategy, and then we give them a little more executive skills, and we then teach this person how to actually align the people, processes, and technology, and how to use AI and where to use AI to augment the system, do it better in an architecture role. Now we're getting into the world of here. And the reasons it's into the world of here is we're dealing with someone that can present in front of the board and close $1 billion deal. And an architect, we have to have that person. We're dealing with that person that can lead a team for 6 to 12 months. We're dealing with the person that can manage a group of stakeholders that all have different needs and harmonize it somehow. So that's realistically speaking what you really need to do. And that's why when we start looking at enterprise architect salaries and cloud architect salaries and security architect salaries, the average security architect salary is about $229 a year. But, a principal architect, and I was a principal architect in less than 2 years, and you could be too with the right training, is about a $375,000 to $400,000 a year job on average. Some of these chief architects, enterprise architects, get into the $1 million range. And where are the really high paid jobs? They're always for the people with the most business acumen. And that's really what I want you to see. It's business acumen related. So match the business acumen on the technology, and it's a pretty good point. But like I said, I don't know where you're actually starting. If you're out there as an $800,000 strategy consultant, I'd say stay at it. But if you're at that in like that junior level consulting role where it's like $130,000, $140,000 a year, you'll probably double that as an enterprise architect fairly quickly. But if you want to come to a webinar, I'm more than happy to ask specific questions, gauge where you're at, gauge your level of executive skills, and then take it from there. Where to find study material to actually learn architecture, not engineering. So as I know right now, and I've been looking for people that I know that teach anything about architecture. There's 3 of us that I know in the entire world. My friend Russ White does some network architecture training that's quite good. And for network architects, it is rock solid. So Russ White's got some great network architecture material. David Lithicum has, by himself, short form architecture concepts where he does a little bit of this, 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 a little bit. And he covers a lot of really good common architecture scenarios in his short form training. It's great stuff. And like David Lithicum says, Mike Gibbs and I are the only 2 people, and we combine together for AI architecture and some other executive architecture things, the only people in the world that are actually teaching architecture. And the reason is we are all architects. We've spent decades as architects, and we know what it takes. And what we do differently than everyone else is everybody else teaches engineering. We teach architecture. Everyone else teaches, how do I code? And then I give my students an architectural case study. And then I say, I need you to respond to this RFP, just like the real world. I need you to come back, give us your RFP response, turn in your architectural artifacts. And we need these particular artifacts, present that to us, and then we're going to groom them. And because that's the architecture job. And then we might work for example, for the last 8 weeks, we've been working on the fundamentals of architecture. Now the students and I are building out an architecture based upon those last 8 weeks of fundamentals. After we do through that, we'll have a little bit more precision stuff, some extra soft skills stuff to do. And then right after that, we're going to go do another architecture project. So with us, everything is architecture, architecture, architecture. We have 4 architecture classes a week, and we do architecture 4 times a week. But otherwise, it's just me. It's David Lithicum, and it is Russ White. Russ on the network side. David Lithicum with us is on the AI side. David Lithicum also does lots of other types of consulting, where there's lots of good training that's out there on AI. But I don't know of anybody, honestly, other than that in the world that's actually doing anything. Although the Cisco CCDE program, the Cisco Certified Design Expert, That is actually a technical architecture exam. It's a little less architecture-y, with less business things, although it's still got it. But the CCDE in that curriculum is also an architecture program, albeit a network architecture program. But that's it. So why don't you join us on the webinar tomorrow? And you keep it. Now, Russ isn't one of our instructors. He's just a friend, as I mentioned earlier, but I do know that he teaches network architecture, and I can recommend it because it's solid. And David Litticum and I are coming to our webinar tomorrow, and we'll talk exactly about what we actually teach in an architect program and what you actually need to learn, because that way you'll know what to do. I'm like, after someone gets a job in an architect, how would they go from, say, an AI architect role to an enterprise architect role in the same company? So if we start looking where we go from these roles, and there doesn't have to be any rhyme or reason to where you start, but let's look at the opportunity, and I like to look strategically at the roles. So I like to start top down, so that way you can really see the role itself and what you would need to move. So if we look at the top of the organization, we've got the C-suite of an organization. So for example, you have the CEO. That's this chief strategist. You have the COO, which is the person that kind of makes sure that everything runs the way it's supposed to. So they're your typical number two in a company. You've got your chief financial officer that makes sure your financial resources are managed. And then you typically have, and I'm going to make it look extra big just for the argument's sake, you've got your chief information officer here. So this is your tech company. So you see that, but for right now, I'm going to get rid of this just to non-clarify that, but I wanted you to see what the typical, company structure looks like at the top. So once we see this, let's look at what's underneath it. It's typically two things. There's usually something for security, but let's keep it fairly simple here. So you typically have somebody that runs stuff, and that's typically your SVP of IT. And you typically have a chief architect in any kind of enterprise. Sometimes this person's called the CTO. Sometimes they have another one. Now, these roles which we're talking about here, this is an extremely high paid executive salary. It could be $500,000 or $1 million more. Now, this is the chief strategist. This is an extreme executive with a little bit of tech in him. Now, the next level down we have here is we have the enterprise architect. So you can see it's darn close to the C-suite. And why is that? Because this person, let's actually bring those other C roles here for a minute. So at this enterprise architect level, if it's a real enterprise architect role, this enterprise architect is going to work with the technology people, but they're also going to be spending a lot of time working with the operations people for, say, the new business architecture, working with the CEO from a strategy perspective. So, this is what we're going to see at the top. So the chief architect is kind of focused on this and in all these places, and the enterprise architect is here because the enterprise architect and the chief architect are basically speaking the same thing. It's just the level of it and the level of executiveness. Now, when we go one level down, let's look at the reality world. And I call them one level down the multi-cloud architect. And here's the reason why. This, by definition, has become a generalist position because the reality is now we have someone that needs to deal with 3 clouds, 4 clouds, 5 clouds, private data centers, and understand everything. And to some degree, there's security in here, there's data in here. So this multi-cloud architect has to do everything. So when you get to a level like here, it's people, processes, and technology. You really don't get deep, which is why the enterprise architect is about 80+% business. When you get to this cloud architect role, it's about 75% business here. because you can't get too deep because you're going to be dealing with the Alibaba cloud and the Dell cloud and the Cisco cloud and the IBM cloud and the AWS cloud and co-location facilities and private data centers and applications from 50 vendors, 100 vendors, security things from tens of vendors. So it's going to be huge. So then when we get underneath that role, we get specialty architects. And this could be things like your AI architect. Oops, bear with me, I was drawing this. I don't know what just happened there. Where did I draw that? Sorry about that. So we might have an AI architect. And we might have a network architect. And we will have a IAM architect, for example. And this is what you're going to see in any well-run organization. Now, you will see some organizations which are like slop and garbage, where they have people doing a lot of roles, but they never really do very well. So this is an organization that uses technology for competitive advantage. This is not one of the 80% of organizations that don't receive competitive advantage from their technology investments. So there's that. Now, we will also see one additional level of architect here, and these are typically the most entry level of the bunch, and they're the solutions architects. And I'll show you where the solutions architects come. So if you work for AWS, you're going to be designing, presenting, and selling AWS stuff to me and making your recommendations to the cloud architect. Same thing if you work for Azure. So when we get a solutions architect, they're typically focused more on the single vendor stuff, getting a little more technical, and that's going to be helpful to us along the way. Now, we're also going to have our AI architects, network architects, and IAM architects. So guess what happens when we go underneath these? We have another level of solutions architect. Now, this particular solutions architect could be coming from Cisco to design, present, and sell Cisco solutions to get that, recommend that to the network architect, to the cloud architect, to the enterprise architect, and moving up. So the reality is it doesn't really matter which one of these you start. If you're here, what do you need to go here? Up. More business acumen, more executive presence, more leadership, more strategy. If you start out as a cloud architect, what do you need? More executive presence, more business leadership, more strategy. And it's all executive skills as you go up. You've got a CISSP. What do you next? What would you like to do? You have a certification, and the certification doesn't equate to skills. If your goal is to be a security architect, I can tell you what to do. But right now, what I would call the CISSP, and I always have, it's my favorite introduction to security. It's not enough for me to hire you. It's not enough. It's not the skills to be an architect. It's not the skills to be an engineer. It's just the certification. So what job would you like? And then I can tell you exactly the set of skills you actually need. Just a certification is just like wrapping paper on a box, but it's missing all the substance inside the box. So let me know what you'd like to do, and I can tell you but the only way to do this is, the first thing we need to know is know where you want to go. Then you have to learn the skills. And I promise you 90% of the skills won't be in any certification. And that has to come before the certification. So let's work backwards. What job would you like? And let's figure out how we can get you there. Companies have different names for other positions. What other names can be handled by architects? So sometimes they call us consultants. Sometimes they call us strategists. Sometimes they call us digital transformation experts. Sometimes those are the other names. Sometimes they call us chief technology officers. And at the enterprise architect level, sometimes they call us management strategy consultants as well in enterprise architecture. So that's the reason why. Should one pursue an MBA or TOGAF certification first to become a solutions architect, given your background in computer science? So your background is software development. So the first thing you're going to have to learn is learn architecture. And then I'll get back to you after that. So what I mean by is learning architecture is right now, you know, software, and software is one piece of the, let's say, the thousands of other pieces in the actual architecture ecosystem. So the first thing we want to know is what kind of solutions architect you need to be. Because the solutions architect, you could be looking to become an applications architect, and that would be a different set of skills, for example, than a solutions architect for Cisco. So we first need to figure out which one. But understand that software development is all about how-to. So you're going to have to be trained from how-to to how to plan and how to design. That's going to be the next set of skills. So once you tell me the type of solutions architect you want, I can tell you how to get there. But I need to know which one. And here's the reason. The skills of a network solutions architect are different than application solutions architect, than a cloud solutions architect, than an AI solutions architect. So let's talk about that. What I will tell you is I'd rather you get architecture training skills and get an architect job and then have your company pay for your MBA. But you're not going to learn architecture by learning engineering and just bolting on business skills. And let me explain to you the difference. So in a software development curriculum, they teach you how to write an application. And that's what they might be doing. Now, here's the real world, say, as a cloud solutions architect. Where should I host the application? What are of my options out there? What type of compute resources do I need? How many cores do I need? At what frequency do those cores need to be? How much DRAM do I need? How much disk IO do I actually need to run that application? What types of network performance? Okay, now I have that application. How do I make it redundant? Do I use a load balancer and this way? And if I use the load balancers, what type of load balancers would I use? Why I would use them? Now, okay, if we're going to make this a web application, how do we secure it? What types of firewalls do we use? What types of trade-offs do we use over those firewalls? What types of IDS, IPSMs do we use? If it's going to be customer access, what kind of customer IAM strategy do we use? Versus what type of internal IAM strategy do I use? No, what's going to go into the demilitarized zone that's going to harden that demilitarized zone where those web servers are going to face? For example, what's being done to the endpoints? So we're putting host base. What are we doing? What are we doing? What kind of hardening of the operating system? What kind of packages are we going to be removing? What type of endpoint protection? Now, where are we sending all those logs? Are we using some type of Siemens source system that uses some AI to kind of automate remediation? What are we constantly doing? Do we put a honeypot to distract the user? So this is what goes into architecture. So you're going to have someone teach you to go architecture, and then you're going to have to learn the business skills. If you're with us, we teach architecture and business skills. But if you only were taught how to do the design, you would still need to learn the business skills. So what did I actually do? And it kind of goes along with what happened. I didn't come from a normal background. So when I took my first job, my previous job was I'm a nurse practitioner in the U.S. I had my own clinical practice in the U.S. A nurse practitioner can do surgery. We can write prescriptions. So we ran our own office. That was my last job. And why do I say that? So in my previous job, where I had an additional 1.5 master's degrees, I was asking people for information. I was preventing information. I was convincing patients why they needed to follow a weight loss plan or stop smoking or take their medication. I had to have a lot of sales, leadership, and executive presence for that job itself. So what ultimately happened is I took my first job as an engineer, and the reality was my brain never did engineering. And every time someone brought me an engineering challenge, I said, well, I don't think that's the right way to do it. I said, if you look here and here, and if you look the way the protocols are designed, you have this little bottleneck here. Instead of trying to engineer your way out of this system, just fix this bottleneck by doing this. And what naturally happened is my brain, because the way I trained in medicine, here's a challenge you have, now use your creative brain and come up with a solution that's based on science. I was actually trained for 7 years into how to do that. So I took my first engineering job, and because I came from a natural architect job, medicine, which is a healthcare architect job, I knew what to do. And therefore, occasionally I get someone like a sales rep or a sales executive. And I'm going to tell you right now, 50% of the enterprise architects that are working there never had a tech job first. 50% of the people that are working out there. Why? Because what comes from learning engineering is so unrelated to architecture. So that's really the key. The key is you have to learn that architecture piece. Now, what is that architecture piece? It's learning all the underlying technologies, not how to build them, how they work, how they fit together, where their bottlenecks are, where their performance limitations are will be, and where any of their challenges are along the way in order to get them to their goal. So that's what we need. So you're going to have to be taught that. And then as far as the business acumen, yeah, you're going to learn it. If you train with us, you're going to get it. If not, I recommend an MBA. And then after that, the last thing that I would do is TOGAF. And here's the reason why. TOGAF is a list of steps. Step 1, determine the architectural vision. Okay. Now, it doesn't tell you how to determine the architectural vision or how to figure it out. It just says determine the architectural vision. And here's a list of documents you should create. It doesn't tell you what you would need to do to even think about the document. The next thing is optimize the business architecture. Well, yeah, that's TOGAF phase B. That's a good thing to do, but wait. If you don't know how to optimize the business architecture, you can't do it. So learn to be an architect first, and you will learn none of this in a certification. And if you want to learn a lot more, join us on the webinar tomorrow. I'm going to be talking about security architect courses. So, but I'll ask any questions you want. How would I handle if recruiters mention they're looking for a hands-on AI architect or AI solutions architect who likes to tinker with different tools? So I would say it doesn't sound like you're looking for a solutions architect. What are you actually looking for? I would ask. So no, in all seriousness, so I have a good friend, and her name is Christina Marino, and she is the CEO of IT Excel in New York, one of the best IT recruiting firms I actually know. And when Christina sees something, and I've asked her, what do you do when you see a job description that you know is not right? She says, I call the hiring manager, because the people that wrote the job description are usually human resources, not the hiring manager itself. So generally speaking, if I speak to a recruiter, I'll do whatever I need to. And when I speak to the hiring manager, I'll be very clear what I can do and what I cannot do, and where my strengths are and how I can honestly help them. But if a recruiter says something, I'd probably find a different recruiter, because that recruiter themselves probably doesn't know. And I'd probably get on the phone with them and ask them, what does the hiring manager really want in their words when you asked for this? Can you check and see if the hiring manager, what they want? And I have. And I've called recruiters and had them check on the hiring managers because the job description seemed wrong. And guess what? What the hiring manager said, because I took one of those jobs as an architect and it had all this tech stuff on there. And I said, I know architects don't do that. And the recruiter presented to me and I said, look, if they're looking for someone that can write a bash shell script and an expect TCL script and manage Linux things and still be a network architect at the same time, I said, it's not possible. Could you find out what they want? And of course, the recruiter calls me back and they said, Mike, we're looking for an architect, someone to understand the organization's needs, understand the growth challenges, plan future capacity and future changes, new systems in the systems. And I said, oh, so what you want is an actual architect? And they said, yeah, it's a good thing you called, Mike. And then I went in for an interview and was hired. So that's exactly what I did and how I did it and why. And that's really the key, is you have to bring it to your terms and you have to control it. One second. So is there a difference between an AI solutions architect and an AI architect? Slightly. So the AI architect is the architect that can walk into any business, learn the business needs, and create an AI strategy that will meet the organization's needs in the best manner possible, using every tool possible in the entire world at their disposal. An AI solutions architect is someone who works for AWS that says, I can design and present and sell an AI solution that uses our stuff. So AI architect, big role. You may have some NVIDIA things in your data center. You may be using some things on Google, maybe some things on AWS. That's an AI architect. AI solutions architect is only design, present, and sell for a single vendor and a single vendor solution. Hope that helps. Do you know why companies are asking for hands-on architects? They're not. So here's what an organization really wants, and let me explain to you how the most job descriptions are actually written. So this is the reality for most of us. So much so we made a comic out of it because it's true. So here I am. I'm at any major cloud provider or tech provider, and I want to hire somebody. So I decide to go to my HR system that says Mike Gibbs wants to hire a cloud architect. Now, what ultimately happens is that now gets to HR, and the HR says, it's time for me to write a job description. But they don't know what the job is. So I'm going to ask every one of you a question. Could you write a job description for a cardiothoracic surgeon? Unless any of you are cardiothoracic surgeons or have spent your life in the operating room as a physician, lay, or an anesthesiologist, you would have no idea. And even as the anesthesiologist, but probably wouldn't, what the skills you need to be a cardiothoracic surgeon. Well, we have the same problem. We've got something here. So what we have is we have the AI, we have the HR people that are going to Google what did people do in their job, and they have no idea. So what happens is they Google other HR people that wrote other jobs that have nothing to do with the real job. So now you've got a garbage job description that really looks like 50 job descriptions. If that's not bad enough, it took a month to get the job approved. And by the time the job was approved, you don't even need a person for the job that you even posted for anymore. So that's really the reality of what's going on in big organizations. So they don't want hands-on architects. Here's what they do want. They want to know that you are not brainwashed by a vendor and their training, and all you have is 6 certifications from a single vendor that says, ooh, I'm excited by this vendor solution. Because that's the most dangerous person I have on my team. The person that understands I've got 10 options. Option 1 has these advantages. Option 2 has these advantages. That's the person I want. What they're looking for someone that has the wisdom or knowledge, and it doesn't depend how you get it, which is why a doctor that just graduated could be just as good as someone that's been practicing for decades, because it's not about your experience, it's about your capabilities. So they want to know that you're not just a certification. They want to know that you might know something, and they have no idea how to guess it. So yeah, hands-on experience. But let's talk about what a hands-on architect is. Because we architects do have a set of hands-on skills. A hands-on architect like me does a lot of communication with the C-suite. That's a hands-on skill. I go to work and I manage a large number of stakeholders. I then go and I facilitate a meeting. I then create some architectural artifacts. I then create a research portfolio and document it and send it out. That's my hands-on skills. So the hands-on skills for an airplane pilot are different than the hands-on skills of a flight attendant. So they want hands-on, but architecture hands-on, just like I want my surgeon's hands-on skills to be doing surgery, not creating pottery, not on jumping out of airplanes, not on boating, not on golf. I want to focus on being the best surgeon in the world. I hope that helps. You wonder why our opinions seem outdated and irrelevant for most employees? Most enterprises today are looking people for strong engineering skills in data, DevOps, and AI, security, and dev. So let me tell you what I talked about 2 years ago, Igor, when I talked about why we stopped selling our engineering program. And I talked about exactly which jobs have gone. Now, I hope you can see a very large number of software developers and engineers have been laid off. Now, what did you see the day after they get laid off? Solutions architects and sales engineers and sales reps were hiring. So there is that. Igor, I'd also like you to look at the actual odds of cloud architecture successes from the organizations that are trying to use a hodgepodge of different ideas and actually give you the statistics. So as it turns out, at least 70% of cloud migrations don't work, typically because of misalignment or poor change management with organizations' needs. A separate study found that and this is according to CIO Dive, that over 50% of cloud architectures and cloud adoptions are complete and total disasters because it never worked. Now, 69% of IT leaders have stated that, wow, as it actually turns out, their cloud budget overruns are expected. Now, let's talk about security breach statistics. When we talked about the need to have specialized engineering and architecture, let's talk about why. 83% of organizations have had a security breach in the last 18 months. 83%. Now, 45% of data breaches occur in the cloud, And why is that? Most people don't understand what they're doing, don't know why they're doing. So as it turns out, everything we said years ago is exactly what happened. That outdated of engineers are going to be fired and replaced by architects is happening. Those massive AI layoffs that we talked about is happening. And now you don't just hear it from me, you hear it from the CEOs themselves. We are laying off these engineers because AI is replacing them. So you may think my things are odd and outdated, but if you actually look at what's going on, and if you look at and ask any of the CEOs what they're doing, they're exactly doing what I said. Because the engineering people that are looking for these engineering things, unfortunately, are a bit like, or don't understand the business things that are actually changing in the world and what's going on around them. So you don't have to take my word for it. You can dive deep into the engineering, but I've given you the statistics. I talked about the companies that are doing it. We talk about companies like Salesforce that are replacing their back-end people every day. So you have to think about it. I said, get out of that and go into sales jobs. I said, get out of hands-on skills because the AI is doing it. And I said, move into this. And as it turned out, just a couple of days ago, do you know what happened? The World Economic Forum came out with a report that completely agreed with everything that I've said. And here's what they actually said. So I want you to see it. So the World Economic Forum came out there a couple of days ago, and they said, these are the skills of yesterday. And look at what they put in there. I'll try to zoom in on my screen so you can see the skills of yesterday. Manual dexterity, like hands-on things. People like me that speak multi-languages because the AI can do that. Programming is the less important thing. Quality control is out there. Attention to detail is going away because AI can do that quality control. Now, let's move that into the jobs of the future. These are the core jobs for the future, and what do they entail? And I want you to look at it. And then I want you to see who's really outdated. The engineers that don't know what's going on, that are suggesting that to you, or the business strategists that are investing the billions of dollars. AI and big data, absolutely, but it's not making the big data. It's what the big data and the AI can do for us. Technological literacy. Note, they didn't say code. Technological literacy is where you actually put your strategy. How do I solve this business problem with this technology? Creative thinking, again, an architecture job. I've got these business challenges. Do I do a layoff? Do I use AI to augment my staff? Can I increase sales? And if so, how do I do it? Leadership and influence. What do we do in the AI architect role? Why can't it be replaced by AI or any of these architect roles? Because you have to manage stakeholders, you have to manage vendors, you have to convince executives to spend $1 billion here and there. And that's all about leadership. Now, why do we say get out of hands-on and get into analytical thinking careers like architecture? Because you can't replace analytical thinking. AI can analyze a large amount of data and make recommendations, but what it can't do is act on incomplete information. Now, incomplete information is where AI hallucinates. And what we do as architects and other executives, like the leaders we talked about, the sales engineers and the sales executives, same kind of people which we said have jobs in the future, they're going to analyze the opportunities and make creative recommendations. Systems thinking, that's architecture all the time. What is the impact of one change on the system to another change on the system? Can't be done very well by AI, but it is done by people. Talent management. Interesting. As an architect, for example, we have to manage a team of 15 to 500 people, depending upon the enterprise or cloud architecture we're working on. What their needs are, how to groom them, how to reward them, how to keep them motivated. Curiosity and lifelong learning. Architecture is something that changes constantly as new business challenges come up, new rules and regulations come up, and new technologies which are disruptive, which can change the way we live, work, and play. So that's the science. That's the World Economic Forum's information as of a couple of weeks ago. So that's the world's greatest minds getting together saying, get out of this stuff and go here, because those old jobs are dying. So it's up to you. But I'll stick with my recommendations. I'll stick with the World Economic Forum's recommendations. It's the same thing the Microsoft CEO is saying. It's the same thing the Meta CEO is saying. It's the same thing the Google CEO is saying. And then I want you to think, if they're investing hundreds of billions of dollars in this, can they make it a reality? That's what I would do. That's how I get my information. Is the role of a pre-sales lead consultant a good stepping stone to develop architecture skills? It'll help. So if you did that and then took architecture training and then got an MBA, you're going to get there. So here's the weirdest thing that I don't understand in tech. In tech, people assume that if they get somebody else's job, they're going to learn it. No, where I come from, which is medicine, we know that if you have somebody else's job, that's not going to teach you your job. And that's why people don't become nurses on their way to become physicians, because if they did, after being as a nurse for 20 years, do you know what they have to do? They have to go to medical school the same time from the beginning. Same time. So I would say being a pre-sales consultant is not a bad thing, but it's not going to be a substitute for architecture training. Now, if you told me that you wanted to go to McKinsey and you went to McKinsey to work there as a business architect, like you had an MBA and then you went to McKinsey. Now, at that point, McKinsey would teach you how to walk. They would teach you how to talk. And they do this for people fresh out of an MBA program. They will teach you what to dress, what not to dress, what you're allowed to say, what not to say, how they want you to give a presentation, what your slides need to look like, the frameworks for all these kind of things. So that is a business architect role. And that would be definitely a stepping stone. But what are they doing? Well, first, and why is McKinsey and Accenture and Deloitte so good at this? Well, the majority of what they do is they hire people with lots of experience, and then they hire people fresh out of MBA programs that they know basically nothing, but we've got good fundamentals. So then they groom you and they train you to be an architect for 6 to 12 months. And then after that, you're there. So you could either train to be an architect or you could do something like that. And that is a great way to get architecture skills. Now, they will only teach you the business side. So you will still need to learn the tech side if you want to go into an enterprise architect role or differently. But at that point, I would tell you that you skip the solutions architect roles because they're the most junior ones out there. And you don't want to waste your time with that after you've already been a business architect. So the only role that would really be good at that point would be the enterprise architect, which is merging of the technology strategy with those there. So being a consultant, it doesn't really necessarily know what it is, and it doesn't matter what in regards with what you're selling. And here's what I mean. In a pre-sales consulting role, you can be selling 3 firewall boxes, and that is not going to be a good stepping stone at all because it taught you how to sell a box. Now, if you are trying to sell a consulting engagement as an architect, and the consulting engagement included a certain number of people, and that included a certain amount of time, which the executive signed an MOU, a commitment to basically spend a certain amount of time. And that included a certain type of documents and deliverables that were going to be prepared. It was going to include speaking to this many focus groups or that. Now you're doing architecture things. So that's really going to be the path. One way is to take something like we have. 2 is to do what many of us did, and I can tell you what I actually did is I ultimately moved into the solutions architect role when I was young. I did. And then after I moved into the solutions architect role and I wanted to move in bigger things, I got in a second MBA. Well, actually, I didn't completely finish the first one. I was 3 cutters there and then stopped. So I did another MBA from scratch. And then I got about $100,000 of executive skills and I was moved into enterprise architect roles. Now, that was CXO relevancy skills. It was presentation skills. It was stage presence skills. It was part of the presentation skills where they brought in actors to coach us on how to have more executive presence and take up more space. I mean, it was consulting on everything, leadership, and that's really where I got there. So kind of hope that makes sense. That's exactly what you need to do. Okay, you'd like to become a security architect. Okay, so tomorrow we're going to have a deep discussion on exactly everything, but let me give you some insights to it right now. The first thing you have to do is learn security architecture skills. So I'll give you some examples. Now, the security architect skills are going to be the business skills, and I'll give you some of them now, and I'll get real deep into tomorrow. But the business skills you would need as a security architect are going to involve sales, risk management, and I'll talk about what goes into that, executive presence, presentation skills, CXO relevance, business acumen, and the ability to lead teams, for example, executive writing skills, and that's going to be there. So what kind of skills are you ultimately going to have to develop? Well, you're going to have to develop those executive skills, which are 50-60% of the job, but also the technical skills. So if we think about risk management, for example, it would be things like, how do we figure out what the organization's assets are? And what are those assets? What is the assets value? How will we classify those assets? things like understanding the organization, cataloging critical systems, understanding what we actually have. Now, at that point, once we know what we have to assess the various types of risks that exist, whether that be evaluating various threats that are out there or weaknesses inside of our systems and the way our data looks like, our AI looks like, whatever. We have to evaluate what's going on there. Now, we will have to design some form of control to reduce some of those risks. A physical control or a technical control, for example, like a firewall, what have you, or an IDS, IPS system. Or we might transfer the risk instead of mitigating the risk to a third party like an insurance company. We have to be able to guide the organization through that. So we have to help that organization create incident response plans and disaster recovery plans and business continuity plans. And, consistently help that organization look at its risk, whether it's maintaining risk registers, etc. Now, you have to also understand network security and how to design it. Where do you put a firewall? Where do you put an IDS IPS system? Where do you send your logging information kind of thing? Do you rate limit on the network? If so, the types of rate limiting, do you use a queuing policy to make sure critical traffic goes through on the network? Do you segment into VLANs? Do you segment further into private VLANs? Do you filter at layer 2 versus layer 3? Those types of things in networking. Where do you put your firewalls, your IDS or IPS system? How many layers of firewalls, the types of firewalls? How would you segment your network on and off the cloud? How would you micro segment it on and off the cloud? Those types of things, but you'd have to know how to design that in, which is why I say you got to learn architecture first. And then you need to understand, how do you design your data security? I mean, for example, what goes into classifying our data? How do we determine how to classify it? How do we control access to the data? How do we ensure the data hasn't been changed? How do we make sure the data stays private, whether it's a data minimization concept or changes to our data lifecycle management or nominalization, pseudo-nominalization, tokenization, obfuscation? Which one do we use and why? And what goes into our data loss prevention strategies and the type of tools that we can use, and how do we prevent data from being exfiltrated? How do we take care of that data while it's at rest? How do we keep it encrypted and private? How do we deal with that data when it's in motion? And how do we deal with that data potentially while it's in DRAM in the CPU, especially on a server that's got multiple customers on it? Now, we typically get a little involved, not like we're looking at code, but a little bit involved with going on to, say, application security and what the things are. And things like we might recommend things like over-the-shoulder check versus automated testing versus things that good applications should behave like, but things like input validation, what have you, secure session management. It's a little bit of guidance we're going to have to know to guide that. We will definitely have to know to guide an organization's IAM strategy, when to use customer IAM versus traditional IAM, when to use role-based versus attribute-based versus context-aware. How and where do we secure cloud and SaaS things with things like cloud access security brokers? What are the different authentication options? What are the weaknesses and strength of each, and when and where should I use them? Those kind of things will go into it. Now, if you're at my level of security architecture, you're probably going to be getting involved in fences, guards, dogs, fire suppression security, because we're being brought in to look at the big picture. Even emergency preparedness, fuel for generators, food for people, escape routes, emergency procedures, that also we could be involved in that too. Now, we'll get involved in a lot of cryptography and designing cryptography, knowing which type of cryptography we should use and where, knowing when and where we should use a digital signature versus another type, the types of cryptography, the strengths and weaknesses which we would use, and how would we prevent attacks on the cryptographic system. And then a lot of it is how would we design inside of, say, a NIST framework or a zero trust framework. So those are the technical skills that you need to understand. Plus, you will need to have good, strong knowledge of the network, the data centers, the cloud, because you can't secure what you don't understand. So I hope that kind of makes sense, and those are going to be the skills that you need. But if you come to the Security Architect webinar tomorrow, we'll talk about how do you get all of those skills. Sean T. Hello, Mike. You work as an InfoSec analyst and recently got your CSP. You want to get to cloud architecture, but don't know where to apply next. Security architecture seems like a great field, but you wouldn't know how to get there. So, Sean, the question I have for you is, which would you prefer to be, a security architect or a cloud architect? And here's the reason. What you're doing now on the SOC will not teach you any cloud architect skills, or it won't teach you any security architect skills either. Now, I really appreciate what people do in the SOC. I love, the operation side, keeping things going up. But the architect skill of the security architect, for example, determining an organization's risks, you typically just don't get in an operations side. Likewise, cloud architecture is not what it looks like in a certification. It is determining which clouds you place your workloads on, which systems you use, which systems you not use. So why don't you, what would you like to do? Would you like to be a cloud architect or a security architect? Because a cloud architect, I don't want you to think it's going to be like get a couple of AWS certifications and you'll know anything about cloud architecture. You won't. In fact, I had interviewed 1,000 people that were AWS certified and asked basic questions. Could you compare and contrast block storage, object storage, file storage, when you would use them, what their use cases are? And I got a resounding like no answer whatsoever from almost the whole 1,000 people. I asked 1,000 AWS certified people, could you tell me what cloud computing is? And they had no idea that it was renting space in somebody else's data center or what even went into the cloud in the first place. No idea, just the names of things. And I asked people, could you tell me how you would connect to the cloud? What are your options and what are the strengths and weaknesses with those options? And they didn't even know you could connect to the cloud other than the Bastion host, which is a security nightmare. They had no idea. So the key is, what architecture job do you want? And then we can teach you how to get there. I can tell you, if your goal is to become a cloud architect, there is a document in the description of this video that teaches you what you need to learn to become a cloud architect. I have to write one of them for security. Now, tomorrow we're going to run a security architecture webinar, and I'd love to invite you there. And then we will cover the full set of skills and everything you need to do and exactly how to get there. And that's what that function is. We'll teach you the skills. We'll teach you the things that hiring managers want in you. We'll teach you the kind of things that belong in your portfolio. We'll teach you what you need to do for certifications and branding after you've got the skills. And then we'll even give you some guidance on interviewing or some things that you should prepare for. So that's what we're going to do tomorrow. And of course, you can ask me any question you want on it. It's live and free on Zoom. And whatever question you ask, I'll be happy to give an answer. So there is that, but please tell me which career you actually want. Because if you want to be a security architect, go be a security architect as your next job. If you want to be a cloud architect, be a cloud architect as your next job. If you want to be a lawyer, go to law school. But it's not, realistically speaking, it's not going to be any easier to go from a security admin to a cloud architect than it would be from an analyst to an architect. You're going to have to learn either way, but you'd probably look a little better in security. You have a better portfolio for it already, even if engineering and administration have nothing to do with architecture, it still looks good. And then it's more about you translating your resume from what you did in the SOC to what were the meaningful business impacts of what you did in the SOC. And that's one of the things we teach our people. So kind of hope that helps. If anyone has questions, please feel free to ask them. I want to do exactly what I can to help you. As a software engineer who's worked with a lot of popular AWS services for 5 years, is looking at certifications, can you go straight for the AWS Solutions Architect? I know people that go straight for the AWS Solutions Architect Professional that are 16 years old and pass it. So there's nothing to stop you from passing the AWS Solutions Architect exam. No, when you pass the AWS Solutions Architect exam, you will still not know anything about solutions architecture. You will know the name of an AWS service and how to configure it, which is very different than walking into an organization, learning about their business goals, their business pain points, business challenges, leading a team of people to go figure out what they have, creating a strategy and a strategic blueprint, running that blueprint across the organization, stakeholders, getting the stakeholders' feedback, creating a governance structure. There's no concept about creating architectural artifacts or documents or any of that in the AWS. But as far as the certification, yeah, you don't need anything to pass it. In fact, I usually tell anybody that's the first place to start. So, of course, you can take the exam. Anybody can. And truth be told, not only could you, you can actually find people that'll push you through that exam in a couple of days by even giving you an answer key with a guarantee, which is the reason most of these certifications don't mean a lot. Because you can pass this exam in a couple of days if you really wanted to with the right certification preparatory materials or practice exams that exist out there. But the answer is yes. But I still want you to learn cloud computing because you won't learn cloud computing in the certification. I want you to learn what the cloud is, the underlying infrastructure of cloud, what makes the cloud possible, when you would take your stuff off of the cloud, when you would put it on the cloud, how to work around performance limitations, how to deal with one cloud going down, and everything else. That's what I want you to learn because that's the skill. Passing a certification, just passing a test. So the question I have for you is, what would you like to do versus what certification would you spend your time on? Because I'll tell you, one of the biggest mistakes I actually see in technology is I want you to compare the brand of two people. I have one brand. I'm looking to hire an airplane pilot. No, this person I'm looking to hire spent 10 years in the Navy as a fighter pilot. Then they worked for Delta Airlines as a pilot, a senior pilot for the last 10 years. And now they came to me with 20 years of experience as an airplane pilot to be an airline captain for the largest airline in the world. Now that person has got something that looks great because their whole life was an airplane pilot. Now imagine that same pilot, a different pilot walks into me. Hey, I got some certifications in this career, dog walking. Hey, and I'm a certified airplane jumper. And I'm a certified firefighter. And I'm a certified paramedic. And I'm a certified linguist. Do we have any confidence that's going to be a great airplane pilot, or do they spend all their life learning everything other than pilot? So what I would say is figure out what you want to do and then back into the skills you need. And then after you have the skills, get your certifications. Because I'm an employer like every other employer, and I don't care at all about your certifications. They're worthless to me. Why are your certifications worthless to me? Because they don't tell me what you can do for me. So your certifications will get you an interview, but your skills get you hired and your skills get you paid as much as possible. Now, the type of skills you have will determine how much you get paid. But, I want you to keep that in the back of your mind. The type of skills you have. Andy, hi, Mike. Is getting a 1-year online MBA from an outbound university good for upgrading your career? So let me actually show you something if I can figure out how to set this up. Bear with me. And that's not going to work. So give me 1 second. What I'm going to do is I'm going to actually take a screenshot that I just collected right now. And when I take this screenshot, what I'm going to do is I'm going to share the screenshot. Give me a second. That's not snip, right? Snipping tool. Get a new snip here, and let me capture this from just the top. So let me copy the screenshot into a slide that I can show you, and I want you to think about it, and then I want you to put it into context what we're actually talking about. Skills versus labels, they are not the same. So copy this. Okay, so here we go. What the heck? Well, I'm not exactly sure what's going on there, so let me try to share it this way real quick. Actually, share the browser window. Tyron, can you share that browser window for me from salary.com? So I just literally went to salary.com and I typed average salary for people with strong business acumen skills. And what are you seeing? You're seeing a mid-range pay of $727. Now, why do I always focus my architects hyper-focused on business acumen? Because that $727 to me is worth a whole lot more than somebody's $80,000 a year coding skills. Because $80,000 from a software developer in India buys me one of the world's greatest coders. So if we think about that from a perspective, that's why I am hyper focused on business acumen. So let's go back and answer that question, which we came out to, which is a 1-year MBA good from a school that is not known? So Andy, we have to separate the difference between capabilities and skills versus piece of papers like degrees and certifications. When it comes down to it as a manager, we don't care about your certifications. We don't care about your degrees. We care about your capabilities. Now, getting you an interview, an MBA of any kind will be helpful, but a more prestigious MBA will get you better interviews as a rule. as long as you're not one of the universities out there that there's public boycotts for, because there's public boycotts on certain universities for the way they behaved by certain organizations. So there's certain things to think about, and I'm not here to say what's right or wrong. So there's that. So now if we think about it, what really matters is the level of business acumen. So if you went to a small private school, and I mean, when I see the professors of University of Tennessee at Martin, like Dr. Long, for example, or Dr. Cooper Johnson, when I see them teach, Andy, I wish I could be in an MBA program again and learn from them because they're that good. Now, that is not, that is more of a teacher's college where when you go to these sort of places, they have people that have actually been executives, they've actually done the job, and the people they're teaching, better. Now, that may not come up in the top 10, but when I've got someone that comes from a school like that, and they come out of that school like that, and they've got really strong business acumen skills, they're on my list to hire. So because they have the skills. Now, I can tell you what I did, and I went to 2 different MBA programs, and I can tell you one was I learned honestly nothing, and one was incredible. I did an MBA program at Drexel in my youth, an executive MBA program, and I made it about half, 3/4 through. It just wasn't for me. I got an offer I couldn't refuse in networking, and I took it, and I never looked back. And then many years later, I wanted an MBA. I felt like I gave up when I should have stuck it out a little longer, but I couldn't because I had the job. And I did a second MBA. Now, Andy, when I did the second MBA, I did something very different. I was living in Princeton, New Jersey. I was working in New York City, and the University Widener was basically by Delaware, the border of Delaware and Pennsylvania. So when I went through this MBA program, I had somewhere 5, 6, 7 hours a day of commuting between Princeton, New Jersey, New York, and Delaware. So every other day I went through an audiobook. So in the course of a 15-week semester, I went through and read all the books that were part of what was my job. I was actually working as an architect designing systems for one of the world's largest banks at the time, their voice systems. And when I was at the same process of doing that, I was listening to all these other audiobooks in addition to the MBA program. And by the time I was done, I was at a level that no one could. We had just fired the Harvard MBA that I just replaced. And I was thriving where that one was fired. So it's not the degree. It's the amount of knowledge you actually have and what you can do with that knowledge and how you can apply that knowledge. That's really what matters. But from a branding perspective, it sure looks a lot nicer if you went to Duke University than if you went in, say, the middle of nowhere. Having said that, it's not about the university. It's about what they teach you. And if you've got a good deal when getting an MBA and you're going to get a good curriculum and it's going to be a rigorous curriculum, it really doesn't matter. It's all about your skills. I'm all about function. And, if you look at Harvard Business Review, 61% of employers now are about function, where they're actually backing out of these things. So focus on your skills. Regardless of where you go to school, if you focus on developing those skills, even if you have to work above and beyond what you were taught in school, you'll be great. You'll have the credentials for an interview, and then you'll have the ability to wow them and conquer it on the interview. So that's what I would do, Andy. And this is a great question. Mr. C, will it be necessary to get a master's degree in a tech job if a person has a non-related bachelor's? For what? So Daniel Bosu, you can see a video of him on our YouTube channel. He was hired out of our program. He did not have a GED. He did not graduate high school, but he was still hired as a solutions architect. There's a YouTube video on our channel you can see. Maybe Tyron, you can find it. I've gotten many people hired without a college degree. And here's what happened, Mr. C. Colleges started teaching things that were just so unrelated to actual functional skills that employers gave up. Microsoft about 2 years ago said we gave up degree requirements for most roles. Google gave up degree requirements for most roles. IBM gave up degree requirements. Nobody cares if you have a degree anymore, because going out of school and not learning anything of value doesn't make you any better. So it's not about your degrees. It's about your skills. Now, I can tell you personally, my bachelor's degree is in nursing. My master's degree is a nurse practitioner. My second master's degree is an MBA. I got my first architect job 25 years ago. I was a principal architect 2 years later. It has nothing to do with what your degree is in. Now, what if I told you, Mr. C, the enterprise architect, which is kind of the king and queen of all the architecture roles, 50% of the people there never worked in tech before they even got the job. So it's not about what your degrees are in. It's all about your skills, your capabilities, and what you know. And to me, that's kind of fun. And the reason it's kind of fun is, when I came from healthcare to open my internal medicine office, I had to go to school for 7 years. Had to get a $100,000 plus education. There was no way to do it otherwise. Had to follow those exact 7 years of regimented things that they were supposed to teach me in school. And then Mr. C, I realized that what they taught me in school versus what I needed to learn in school wasn't enough. So I doubled and tripled the education on my own just to be good at that medicine job, when I first got it. So the real thing to really talk about is what we're really referring to. It's not necessary to get a master's degree. It's not necessary to get a degree. Do I like degrees? Yes, I love degrees. Would I encourage you to get a long-term MBA? The answer is yes, if you want to be in an architecture job. But you can get hired without it. You can have your employer pay the $100,000 for the MBA in many cases if you are in an architect job. And why not? Why not go there? Why not do a little bit each year? Have your employer pay for it, and maybe you don't have to pay anything for it. Now you've got a better degree. You've got a better job. You're earning lots of money along the way. And it's done for you. So that's what I did. I got my second master's degree. Well, actually, it would be third because I was doing an MBA on my own when I was younger. But I didn't finish it. And then ultimately, I did another one from scratch at Widener University, which was really one of the best things that I had done. It was just an incredible experience for me, and I absolutely loved it. But no, you don't need one. Okay, well, don't have a lot of time, so I'll see if anybody has any last questions. If you do, I'll answer them. And otherwise, I want to remind everybody that tomorrow we have a webinar on how to become a security architect. We'll go over all the skills for the role, talk about what we do, everything you need to learn to be hired for your first security architect job. And if you've got questions on other tech careers, it'll be live on Zoom. It'll be free on Zoom, and I'll answer any questions I have. I also want to let you know we've got a lot of guides on helping you in the description of this video. So go sign up for a few things. And summer savings, 50% off on all of our programs if you want to take advantage of them. So if you've got any questions, bring them in. I see one popped in. If another one covers it, if not, we'll end a little early today. And that's okay too, because I know I'm behind on a few things. Hi, you're a network security engineer, no degree, CCNA and Fortinet certified. Currently preparing for the CCIE security. Is that a good path to become a security architect? Well, not really. Because the CCIE is an engineering certification, not an architecture certification. So I hold the CCIE. I hold the CCIE in networking. My number is 7417. You can see that green plaque, and the number 7417 goes back a long time ago. I'm one of the first CCIEs. Now, Olivier, we know what happened. When I was at Cisco, at some point I was asked to remove the CCIE from my business card because the engineering techiness did not match with security. So let's talk about the difference of what's going to be in a CCIE security versus what you need to know for actual security. So the CCIE security is basically they will ask you to create a security design, a design that was never designed to work or never designed to be good in the first place, a design that's intentionally broken. And then what they're going to do is to give you a crazy scenario and ask you from an engineering perspective to go fix it, and then design it, build it, and what it needs to be. And it's going to be 100% focused on how to do stuff. Now, unfortunately, that how to do stuff from the engineering leads me to be taking CCIEs in all the time. I'm constantly taking in CCIEs and retraining them for architecture because CCIE is engineering, and it has honestly nothing to do with architecture. So what's going to be the different set of skills? Instead of you knowing how to configure a Cisco firewall, which is part of the CCIE, I need you to be able to look at the firewalls differently. Which firewalls should I use? Should it be the Cisco? Should it not be the Cisco? What are the strengths of the Cisco things, and how does that compare with the Palo Alto one? Where are my weaknesses here? How many layers of firewalls do I need? And if so, what are the trade-offs of the layers of firewalls? Now, at the same time, when you might need to be looking at that, I might need you to create an IAM strategy. And guess what? There's lots of identity things better than Cisco stuff out there that's out there. So I might be asking you what's going to go into the customer IAM strategy as an architect versus what's going to go into the internal, and that's going to be a non-Cisco tool in most cases. Now, maybe I'm using Cisco SIEM and source systems. Maybe I'm not. What's going to be best for our organization? So the architect role is about presenting it, managing stakeholders, leading teams, managing risk, giving executive briefings versus the CCIA, which is, security protocols and how to configure them. So it's not going to get you there. Now, what it will do is, if you do the CCIA security, it will give you very strong security fundamentals. And when I say strong, I mean real strong. No, those security fundamentals that you will actually learn in the CCIA after you're trained to become an architect, because you'll probably need training to become an architect because it's training you to be an engineer versus an architect. At that point, there'll be a point where you're going to say, oh, I see it. I see where this content delivery network is going to shield our organization in this manner, and this manner, and this manner. But here's where it's not going to protect us. So for this thing, we could do this versus this. We've got a gap in here, and we can change this. These are our backup business continuity plans. These are our disaster recovery plans. This is what goes into writing a security policy. This is what goes into crafting incident response procedures. This is what goes into responding to an RFP from the client. This is what it takes to present to the C-suite and the board. That's architecture. So why am I doing this? And why do I focus so much on architecture versus engineering? What if I told you in 60% of architecture interviews, the person is immediately failed because they show engineering skills versus architect skills? Over 60% of all interviews for the security architect. Now, what are some of the other reasons people fail the security architect interview? Lack of business acumen, lack of executive presence, lack of the ability to exercise influence, lack of leadership skills, lack of all of those. And unfortunately, none of them are in the MBA program. So if you were going to do it, I give you two options. One option is to train to be a security architect with the kind of program we have. That'll get you there. The next option could be, if you wanted to do the CCIE, and you did the CCIE, I'd say do the CCIE, then get an MBA for the business skills you need, then work at a company like McKinsey, Accenture, Deloitte to actually learn consulting skills. And then if you had those consulting skills, then you could take your actually security skills and you would learn how to apply them. No, get an MBA, go get a job at a big four consulting firm and to convince them to train you and spend $100,000 on you to turn you into something. I don't like those odds. I'd rather study to be an architect. But we have to know there's a massive difference between our security architecture, security engineering. In security engineering, you're configuring a firewall like you'll do in your CCI exam. In security architecture, you're going to be quantifying an organization's assets, determining what the risk to those assets, the threats of those assets, the weaknesses in your systems, what will happen if it gets attacked, and how do you mitigate against that threat? Sometimes the best mitigation is to transfer the risk to an insurance company. Sometimes it's to mitigate it with a technical control or a physical control or an administrative control. That's the difference between architecture and engineering. So not really going to help you by learning how to be an engineer to be an architect. You want to be an architect, learn how to be an architect. And the same reason we have the two jobs, the nurse and the physician. The physician's the strategist. The physician is the architect. Somebody comes in and we create a plan. Okay, you're going to go to the cardiologist. You're going to get a stress test from the cardiologist. While we do that, I'm going to give you this medication to lower your blood pressure, but the cardiologist is going to consult on this, 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 and this. That job, that coordination that a primary doctor does is exactly what the architect does, which is exactly the opposite of the nurse who carries out the plan by starting the IV or titrating the nitrogen or putting the EKG leads on. Doctor build the plan. Architect build the plan, engineer go build it. Architect design the strategy for the building. Engineer go build the building. Completely different set of skills. I hope, Olivier, that actually makes sense. And please join me on tomorrow's Architect webinar. And on that webinar, we'll give you the list of every little skill that you need. Every skill. And then we'll talk about the difference between the security architect and the engineer. And if you want, we can even talk about why I was forced by my company to actually remove the CCIE and CISSP from my business cards once I reached an executive level because my management thought it didn't represent me well as an architect. It made me look too much like an engineer. So just keep that in the back of your mind. Join us tomorrow in the free How to Become a Security Architect webinar, and I look forward to speaking to you. Okay, so I don't see any more questions. So join us on the Security Architect webinar tomorrow. Tyron from my team will drop that link into the chat box. Go do check out some of the free resources in the description of this video and sign up for some. They'll be emailed to you. And take advantage of the summer savings, the 50% off if you're looking to become an architect now. And if you want to meet me tomorrow, I look forward to seeing you on the webinar. I'll answer any questions.